Uncle sent me video of my family calling me worthless burden, so I made them homeless. I never expected my own family to betray me like this. They called me a worthless burden, while I was the one secretly paying their mortgage for years. But the moment I saw that video, everything changed. What I did next left them speechless and homeless. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story, it's a lesson in betrayal, karma, and the power of taking back control. I never imagined that a single video could change everything. But there it was, sitting in my inbox like a ticking time bomb. The subject line was simple: "You need to see this." It was from my uncle, someone who had always been on the outskirts of family drama, but never truly involved. I hesitated for a moment before clicking play, my fingers trembling slightly over the mouse. The screen flickered, and suddenly, I was staring at a scene so familiar yet so foreign at the same time. My family, gathered around the old wooden table in the house I had grown up in, the same house I had fought to keep them in for years. The warm glow of the Arizona sunset streamed through the windows, casting a golden hue over the kitchen, making everything feel almost peaceful. But then I heard it. "She thinks she's so generous," my mother scoffed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Like we should be grateful for the crumbs she throws at us." My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer to the screen, hoping, praying that I had misheard. My brother Jake let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Right? Like she's some kind of saint. Please. She wouldn't be where she is if it weren't for us. She owes us." My father, the man who had once carried me on his shoulders and taught me how to ride a bike, merely nodded in agreement. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Owes them? For what? Keeping a roof over their heads when they were on the brink of losing everything? Paying off their mortgage month after month so they wouldn't have to uproot their lives? I had done all of it without asking for a single thank you. And yet, here they were, acting as if I was nothing more than a burden, an ATM they could withdraw from whenever they pleased. I replayed the video 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the ease with which they said them, the casual disdain, the entitlement. A text popped up from my uncle before I even had time to process it all. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. They've been talking like this for months. Months. I forced myself to take deep, steady breaths. I couldn't let them see me break. Not now. I turned to my laptop and pulled up the financial records I had meticulously kept over the past 4 years. Over $250,000. That's how much I had spent keeping them afloat, all under the guise of a silent benefactor. When the housing market had crashed and they were drowning in debt, I had stepped in discreetly, of course. I knew their pride wouldn't allow them to accept direct help, so I'd set up an LLC, Westview Holdings, and had the bank transfer the mortgage to it. As far as they knew, they were still making payments to a faceless institution, just another bill they had to deal with. What they didn't know was that I had been covering the majority of those payments. Every month, I had quietly ensured they stayed in that house, that they didn't have to worry about being homeless. And they had the audacity to call me a burden? A slow, bitter laugh escaped my lips as I scrolled through the figures. My financial advisor, Naomi, had insisted on one specific clause when setting up the agreement, a purchase option. If they missed a single payment, Westview Holdings had the right to take full ownership of the house, effectively making them tenants. At the time, it had felt unnecessary, a mere formality. Now, it felt like a lifeline. I stared at the next due date on the spreadsheet 2 weeks from today. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up my phone and typed a quick message back to my uncle. "Thank you for showing me the truth. Don't worry. I won't mention this came from you, but things are about to change." I had spent years bending over backward to keep my family safe. I had sacrificed, given, supported them through every financial hardship. But this was the final straw. They thought I owed them. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the darkened room. Outside, The city lights of Phoenix flickered like tiny stars, casting their reflections on my window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, mind racing, heart pounding. I had spent years believing I was doing the right thing, sacrificing, giving, making sure my family never had to struggle. And for what? To be ridiculed behind my back? To be reduced to nothing more than an open checkbook? I played the video again just once, needing to hear the words with fresh clarity. My mother's sharp tone, my brother's arrogance, my father's silent nod of approval. Each sentence replayed like a slow-motion car crash, impossible to look away from. She thinks she's so generous. She owes us. What a joke. A joke. That's what I was to them. I clicked over to my financial records, scrolling through the payments I had made on their behalf. Every number told a story of a daughter who had put her family's well-being before her own, of a woman who had worked long hours in the tech industry to ensure her parents never had to worry about foreclosure, of a sister who had covered for her brother's reckless financial decisions. $5,800 a month, that's how much I had been covering. That's what they had taken for granted. The next mortgage payment was due in 13 days, and for the first time, I wasn't going to pay it. I reached for my phone and dialed Naomi, my financial advisor. She answered on the second ring. "I had a feeling I'd be hearing from you soon," she said, her voice calm, measured. Naomi had been with me through every major financial decision of my adult life, buying my first home, investing in stocks, setting up Westview Holdings. She had also been the one to insist on the purchase option clause in my parents' mortgage contract. "They think I owe them," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "They have no idea," she exhaled, as if choosing her words carefully. "You're talking about activating the clause, aren't you?" I glanced at the contract open on my screen. The terms were clear. If they defaulted on a payment, I had the right to exercise the purchase option immediately, meaning the house would legally belong to Westview Holdings, and they would become tenants. And if they didn't pay rent, Arizona state law gave me the right to evict them. For 4 years, I had protected them from this reality. But now, I want to be ready, I said. "Then we should talk strategy," Naomi replied. "Are you planning to tell them beforehand?" I let out a cold laugh. "No, I want them to realize it on their own. Let them panic. Let them scramble. They deserve to feel what it's like to not know where their next payment is coming from." "Understood," she said. "I'll have everything in place. If they default, we'll move forward." I hung up, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I had always been the one to fix things, to step in before disaster struck. But this time, I was going to let the chips fall exactly where they were meant to. 2 days later, I received an invitation to family dinner. "Mom, sweetheart, we're having dinner Sunday night. We'd love to see you. It's been too long." The message should have made me feel something: warmth, nostalgia, maybe even guilt. But instead, all I could see were dollar signs, swirling in my mind like ghosts of sacrifices past. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to ask for more money. I debated declining, but then an idea took root in my mind, curling its way through my thoughts like a vine. What if I went? What if I played along? What if I let them dig their own graves? I typed out my response. "Me, of course. Looking forward to it. Let the games begin." Sunday arrived, and with it, an almost eerie sense of normalcy. The house, my house, technically looked the same as it always had. The front porch light flickered slightly, just like it had when I was a teenager. The scent of my mother's lasagna wafted through the air as I stepped inside, triggering memories of childhood dinners, of laughter, of times when I still believed family meant something. But those memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. My mother greeted me with a warm smile, her arms outstretched for a hug. I let her pull me in, forcing myself to ignore the sickening irony of it all. "You look wonderful, sweetheart," she said. "Thanks," I replied smoothly, my voice giving away nothing. Jake was already at the dining table, a smug grin stretched across his face. I felt my stomach churn at the sight of him, remembering his words in the video, "She barely helps with the mortgage." My father sat at the head of the table, flipping through a stack of bank statements. My breath hitched for a split second before I forced myself to remain calm. They were preparing their pitch, lining up their reasons, their manipulations, their carefully chosen words designed to make me fold. We sat down, and my mother wasted no time. "Honey," she began, reaching for my hand like she always did before asking for something, "your father and I have been talking, and we were hoping you might be able to help us out a little more with the mortgage." I took a slow sip of my wine, allowing the silence to stretch. "Help?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "Haven't I already been helping?" Jake scoffed, shaking his head. "Come on, Lindsay. We both know you could be doing a lot more." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to smile. "Oh," I said, tilting my head slightly. "How much more are you thinking?" My father cleared his throat. "An extra $2,000 a month should cover what we need." I nearly laughed. 2,000. On top of the 5,000 I was already paying. Their audacity was almost impressive. I set my glass down, fingers drumming against the table. "I'll think about it," I said finally, keeping my tone light. My mother beamed as if she had already won, the fools. Dinner continued, filled with false pleasantries and carefully veiled manipulation. They had no idea what was coming, and that was the best part. As I left that night, my father clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm, expectant. "I knew you'd do the right thing," he said. I met his gaze, my lips curling into a slow, deliberate smile. "Oh, Dad," I murmured, "if only you knew." "So, what would you do if you found out your family had been lying to you for years? Would you confront them, cut them off, or make them pay for their deception?" I had a plan, and trust me, it was more ruthless than they could have ever imagined. But before I tell you exactly what I did, I want to know, if you were in my shoes, which option would you choose? Comment 1, if you'd walk away and never look back, or 2, if you'd make sure they felt the consequences of their actions. The drive home that night felt surreal. The city lights blurred outside my window, streaks of neon and halogen mixing into the darkened streets like an abstract painting. My mind was buzzing, my pulse steady but charged, like a storm waiting to break. They had no idea that their golden ticket, their bottomless ATM, had just closed its vault for good. No idea that the very thing they felt entitled to was about to become the source of their downfall. I pulled into my driveway and let out a long breath, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My parents had perfected the art of manipulation, guilt, obligation, the carefully crafted narrative of self-sacrifice. They had played their roles flawlessly. My mother with her gentle touches, her sweet voice masking the razor-sharp greed beneath. My father, all stern authority, treating me like a child who just needed a little nudging to see reason. And Jake, smug, arrogant, utterly convinced of his superiority, despite the fact that I was the one keeping the roof over his head. I should have been furious, but instead I felt something else. Something colder, more precise. I felt ready. My phone buzzed as I stepped into my house. "Naomi, how did it go?" I let out a slow, measured breath before responding. "Me, exactly as expected. They want an extra $2,000 a month, on top of everything else." A few moments later, the typing bubbles appeared. "Naomi, unbelievable. You sticking to the plan?" "Me, absolutely." "Naomi, good. I'll double-check everything tomorrow. Make sure we're ready to file the paperwork." The second they default, I tossed my phone onto the counter and exhaled. 13 days. That's all it would take. 13 days before everything changed. The next morning, I woke up feeling oddly at peace. My coffee tasted richer. The Arizona sun streaming through my kitchen window felt warmer. The silence of my house more comforting. I had spent years living under the weight of their expectations, their endless needs. But today I felt light. I spent the morning reviewing every document, every clause, every legal safeguard Naomi had put in place when we first structured the mortgage deal. The purchase option clause was airtight. They had signed away their rights 4 years ago, too desperate to notice the fine print. The house legally belonged to Westview Holdings, my LLC, and in 12 days, they would figure that out. By lunchtime, I was feeling so good I decided to treat myself to something I hadn't had in a while leisure. I grabbed my purse, slid on my sunglasses, and drove downtown to a cafe I used to love but hadn't visited in years. I ordered a latte and settled into a booth by the window, savoring the simple pleasure of being alone, uninterrupted, free. And then, as if the universe couldn't let me have one damn moment of peace, my phone rang. My mother. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. But then a thought struck me. What if this was it? What if they were already sensing something was wrong? I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hey, Mom. Sweetheart." Her voice was too sweet, too eager, like she was trying to reel me in with honey before dropping the bait. "I just wanted to say how wonderful it was to see you last night." It felt like old times, didn't it? I sipped my latte, my pulse steady. "Yeah, sure." She let out a soft laugh. "Your father and I were just talking about how proud we are of you. You've done so well for yourself, Lindsay." Ah, there it was, the praise before the ask. "That means a lot," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Well," she sighed dramatically, "I hate to bring this up again, but, sweetheart, things are really tight right now. You know how much we've always done for you, and I cut her off. "Mom," she paused. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Of course, sweetheart," she said quickly, backtracking. "I don't want to pressure you. We were hoping you'd be able to send that extra money soon." I stared out the window, watching people go about their lives. People who weren't trapped in cycles of guilt and obligation. "How soon?" I asked, purely out of curiosity. "Oh, by next Friday would be perfect," she said, relief flooding her voice. Next Friday, the same day their mortgage payment was due. The same day they would default. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. I leaned back in my seat, twirling my spoon idly in my coffee. "I'll think about it," I said, the same words I had used at dinner. Her tone shifted, barely perceptible, but I caught it. A flicker of frustration beneath the sweetness. "Of course," she said again. But this time, it sounded less like a request and more like a warning. I hung up shortly after, my hands calm, my resolve steel. I had spent my entire life being their safety net, their backup plan, their unpaid debt collector. And next Friday, for the first time, I was going to let them fall. By the time I got home that evening, the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. Not in a way that made me second-guess my decision, but in the way you feel right before stepping onto a roller coaster when you know there's no turning back, that the drop is coming, and you're bracing yourself for impact. The messages from my mother had started coming in regularly, each one laced with carefully crafted guilt. "We just need a little help, sweetheart. You know we'd do the same for you. Family takes care of each other." I almost laughed at that one. Family takes care of each other? That's rich. Coming from people who had spent years draining me dry, while whispering behind my back about how little I actually did for them. I didn't respond. I wouldn't respond. At this point, engaging would only give them the satisfaction of thinking they still had control over me. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and scrolled through the financial records again. Every payment, every deposit I had made, every dime I had invested into their home, while they continued to believe they were entitled to it. The numbers didn't lie. $278,450. That's what I had poured into that house over the past 4 years. And their contribution? A measly fraction of that. The sheer audacity of it made my blood simmer. I shut my laptop, exhaled, and forced myself to focus. I wasn't going to let emotion get the better of me. Not now. I had 9 days left. The next morning, I woke up to an unexpected call from Naomi. "They're desperate," she said, skipping any pleasantries. I just checked the system. Your dad tried to call the mortgage company directly this morning. I sat up instantly, my pulse spiking. What? Yeah. Guess he's starting to panic. The payment deadline is creeping up, and I bet he's realizing they don't actually know who they've been paying all this time. I ran a hand through my hair, processing. My father had always had this unshakable confidence, this certainty that he was the one in control, that the world bent to his will. For the first time, he was the one grasping at straws. What did they tell him? I asked. Naomi chuckled. That they don't discuss private business transactions with third parties. He didn't like that answer. Kept pushing, trying to find out if something had changed with the account. I smirked, picturing my father's frustration as he hit wall after wall. And they still have no idea that I own it? Not a clue, she confirmed. They think they're just dealing with some faceless mortgage company. I shook my head, half in disbelief, half in amusement. 4 years. 4 years. And they never even questioned where the money was coming from. They're going to figure it out soon, I murmured. Yeah, Naomi agreed, her tone shifting to something more serious. And when they do, they're going to lose it. I swallowed, feeling that familiar flicker of nerves again. Not because I was afraid of them, I wasn't. Not anymore. But because I knew exactly what they were capable of when they felt like they were losing control. We're ready, Naomi reassured me. The paperwork is ironclad. They can't fight this. I let out a slow breath. Then let's see what they do next. I didn't have to wait long. That night, around 9 p.m., my phone rang. My brother. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Lindsay. Jake's voice came through the line, a little too smooth, a little too forced. Hey, sis. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand. Jake. There was a pause. Then a laugh, casual, like we were catching up over coffee instead of standing on the edge of a financial war. Listen, he started. Mom and Dad mentioned they asked for some extra help from you. I just wanted to check in, see where your head's at. See where my head's at? I swirled the wine in my glass. Oh, just thinking about all the ways I can continue to support my dear struggling family. He chuckled, but it was forced. Come on, Linz, don't be like that. Like what? I said, feigning innocence. He hesitated. Like, defensive. Defensive. That word settled over me like a lead weight. Defensive? That's what they always said when I wasn't bending to their will, when I wasn't playing along with their carefully constructed narratives. I exhaled slowly. Jake. Cut the crap. What do you really want? Silence. Then, another forced laugh. All right, fine, he admitted. Look, we just need some security, okay? Things are tight. We've been covering the mortgage all this time, and I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Oh, have you? I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You've been covering the mortgage? That's interesting. A beat of silence. Then his tone sharpened. What's that supposed to mean? I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring the moment. I mean, it's just funny how you're so convinced you've been the one keeping things afloat, when, in reality, you've been living in a house you don't even own. His breath hitched, just slightly. But I caught it. Lindsay, I have to go, I cut in, my voice cool. Busy night. But hey, good luck with that mortgage payment next week. I hung up before he could respond. Then, I smiled. They were scrambling, and it was only going to get worse the next morning. I woke up to 4 missed calls from my mother and a long, rambling text that made my stomach tighten not with fear, but with satisfaction. Lindsay, we really need to talk. I don't understand what's happening, but something is wrong with the mortgage. Your father is very upset. Can you please call us back? We just want to make sure everything is okay. We love you. We love you. They always threw that in at the end, didn't they? Like some kind of verbal bandage meant to cover up years of manipulation, guilt trips, and gaslighting. I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it without responding. They were starting to panic. And it was only going to get worse. By lunchtime, Naomi sent me a quick update. They tried calling the bank again. Your dad sounded pissed. He's demanding to know why the payment hasn't gone through, but obviously no one is telling him anything. I smirked. Let him stew. She let out a small laugh. You're kind of terrifying when you want to be, you know that? I took a sip of my iced coffee, letting the cool bitterness settle on my tongue before responding. No, Naomi. I'm just done being a doormat. She exhaled. Yeah, I get it. So, what's the next move? I glanced at my laptop, at the purchase option clause highlighted in bold on the mortgage contract. The deadline is in 5 days, I said slowly. They have no idea what's coming. Naomi whistled. Well, if I were them, I'd start packing. That evening, I got another call from Jake. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear just how desperate he was getting. Lindsay, he said the second I picked up, his voice sharper than before. What the hell is going on? I leaned back against my couch, twirling the stem of my wine glass between my fingers. Care to be more specific? He scoffed. Cut the crap. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Something's wrong with the mortgage, and you assume I have something to do with it? I finished for him, my voice calm. Silence. Then, a frustrated exhale. Do you? I smirked. What if I did? Another pause. I could practically hear his mind scrambling for an angle. You'd really do this to us? He finally asked, voice laced with faux disbelief. Your own family? Ah, there it was. The guilt trip. I exhaled through my nose. Jake, remind me again, how much have you personally contributed to the mortgage over the last 4 years? Silence. You don't even know, do you? I continued. Because it wasn't you keeping that house afloat. It was me. Every month. Every damn payment. And you all sat around that kitchen table and called me a worthless burden while you spent my money. Jake stammered, but I didn't give him a chance to recover. You want to talk about family? I pressed. Tell me, Jake, when was the last time you even asked how I was doing? Or did you only remember I existed when you needed my wallet? Lindsay, that's not fair. Oh, it's not fair? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. What's not fair is being treated like an ATM for years, while you all schemed behind my back. What's not fair is listening to you, call me selfish, when I've been the only reason you still have a roof over your heads. What's not fair is that you think you can manipulate me into saving you one more time. His breathing was heavy now. He was trying to stay composed, but I could hear the panic seeping in. You don't have to do this. He tried again. Softer now. We can fix this. Work something out. I smiled. There it was. The first crack in his arrogance. Fix it? I repeated, my voice almost amused. Jake, you don't even realize, do you? This isn't something you can fix. This isn't something you can manipulate your way out of. I let the words sink in for a beat before delivering the final blow. You missed your last payment. And per the terms of the mortgage agreement, that house is legally mine. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. Lindsay, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. What the hell are you talking about? I leaned forward, gripping the phone just a little tighter. Check the fine print, Jake. The name on your mortgage? It's not a bank, it's my LLC. You've been paying rent to me for 4 years. His breath hitched. No, that's not possible. Go ahead, I challenged. Ask Dad, ask Mom. Ask them if they ever actually read the agreement they signed when they were desperate for my money. Another pause. Then something that almost sounded like fear. Lindsay, you can't do this. I let out a slow breath, letting the power of the moment settle in my bones. Oh, Jake, I murmured, my voice steady, final. I already did. Then I hung up. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I woke up the next morning to 10 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and 1 from an unknown number, probably their lawyer. I didn't bother listening to the voicemails. I already knew what they would say. Desperation, rage, begging, threats. I stretched, exhaling slowly as I sat up in bed. They were spiraling. I checked my email next. As expected, an urgent message from the bank. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, we regret to inform you that your mortgage payment has not been received. Per the contractual agreement, ownership has now transferred to Divine Investments, LLC. Please find attached the updated property deed reflecting this change. There it was, the official nail in their coffin. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle as I scrolled down. Attached was a copy of the purchase option clause, the one they never bothered to read, the one that gave me full legal ownership of the house the second they defaulted. For the first time in years, they weren't in control. I smiled. I barely had time to put my mug down before my phone started ringing again. My mother. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but there was something deeply satisfying about hearing her panic firsthand. I answered on the third ring. Lindsay. Her voice was shrill, frantic. Something's wrong. The bank made a mistake. They're saying we don't own the house anymore. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, keeping my voice calm, detached. They didn't make a mistake, Mom. She spluttered. What do you mean? I sighed, pretending to be patient. I mean that you missed your payment. And per the mortgage agreement, ownership of the house transferred to me. Silence. Then a shaky exhale. Lindsay, you wouldn't do this to your own family. Ah, the guilt trip. Right on schedule. I set my coffee down, tightening my grip on the phone. Wouldn't I? Tell me, Mom, did you think about family when you sat at that kitchen table calling me a burden? When you mocked me for being single? When you said I owed you more? She inhaled sharply. That's not fair. I let out a low laugh. Oh, now it's not fair? You had 4 years of my money. 4 years of me paying for a house I wasn't even living in. And you're upset because now you have to face the consequences? You could have told us, she snapped, her voice trembling. You could have warned us. I raised an eyebrow. You mean like how you warned me before you started scheming behind my back? How you warned me before you tried to blackmail me over a fake tuition loan? A long pause. Then, her tone shifted quieter, colder. This isn't over, Lindsay. We'll fight this. I smiled, already prepared. You can try, I said lightly. But I'd advise against wasting your money on a lawyer. You signed the contract, Mom. It's airtight. You handed me that house the second you missed your payment. Another sharp inhale. Please, Lindsay, she whispered now, dropping the anger, the arrogance. We have nowhere else to go. I swallowed. Because here's the thing, for one brief second, I almost felt it. The pull, the instinct. The part of me that had spent years trying to please them, years sacrificing my own happiness just to earn their approval. But then I remembered everything. The video, the group chat, the way they laughed at me. I took a slow breath. Not my problem. And then I hung up. That night, I met Naomi for drinks at a rooftop bar downtown. She handed me a martini, raising an eyebrow. So, how's it feel? I exhaled, staring out at the glittering city skyline. Weirdly. Good, she smirked. That's what revenge should feel like. I took a sip, letting the cool burn of vodka settle in my chest. They're going to try something. I can feel it. She nodded. Of course they are. They're cornered. I glanced at my phone, at the growing list of blocked numbers. They won't stop until they think they have the upper hand again. Naomi leaned in. Then don't give them one. I smiled. Because she was right, and I already knew exactly what to do next. The final blow came 2 days later. My uncle sent me another video. This time, my parents were sitting in their living room, arguing. You should have just asked her for more money, my father snapped, pacing the floor. Oh, and what? Just beg? My mother hissed. She was always going to turn on us. You saw how smug she was at dinner. Jake, sitting silently in the corner, spoke up then. So what do? My mother exhaled. We fight. We find something we can use against her, something to get the house back. My father nodded. We still have access to her old laptop. Maybe we can. I stopped the video. My blood ran cold. They were really going to try this. I clenched my jaw, my grip on my phone tightening. You really should have just taken the loss, I muttered to myself. I dialed Naomi. Hey, she answered immediately. They're making a move, I said, my voice steady. We need to be 10 steps ahead. She didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. I exhaled, closing my eyes for half a second. Everything. I barely had time to process my uncle's video before my phone rang. Unknown number. No voicemail this time. I exhaled, steadying my pulse. I knew exactly who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. Lindsay. My father's voice came through, calm, measured too measured. We need to talk, I smirked, setting my coffee down. Do we? You've made a huge mistake, he said evenly. We've spoken to a lawyer. What you did taking the house, it won't hold up in court. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice bored. And what exactly do you think I did, Dad? Silence. Then, a low exhale. You manipulated us, he said, his tone tightening. Tricked us into signing a contract we didn't understand. I laughed. Oh, so now it's my fault that you didn't read what you signed? That you didn't bother to check where your payments were going? That you just assumed I was some brainless little girl who'd keep cleaning up your messes forever? He inhaled sharply. You can't do this to your family. There it is, I muttered. Excuse me? The family card, I said, pushing back in my chair. You only pull it out when you're losing. Where was all this family loyalty when you were sitting around that table calling me a worthless burden? Where was it when you were planning to blackmail me? His voice dropped, turning cold. You have no idea what you've started. I smiled. Good. Let him be mad. Let him feel powerless for once. You'll regret this, Lindsay, he warned, his voice dark. Maybe, I said lightly, but I doubt it. And then I hung up. I spent the next 2 days waiting for them to make a move, waiting for the inevitable backlash. I didn't have to wait long. The first sign came through an email from my employer, Lindsay. HR received an anonymous report about potential misconduct regarding company resources. We're conducting an internal review, but wanted to give you a chance to discuss it first. I stared at the screen, pulse steady. There it was, their first shot. They were trying to frame me probably for some fabricated crime, hoping to get me fired before I could fight back. Pathetic. I forwarded the email to Naomi. They're coming for my job. Her response came almost instantly. They won't win. Let's get ahead of it. I spent the next hour compiling everything. Screenshots of their blackmail attempt, the texts, the emails, the video, a full, unbreakable case showing exactly how far they were willing to go. And then I walked into HR myself. The meeting was brief. The second I laid out my evidence, my HR rep's expression shifted. She hesitated, flipping through the documents. I'll be honest, we've never seen anything quite like this before. Yeah, I said dryly. That makes 2 of us. She exhaled. This isn't just retaliation, this is malicious. If they continue harassing you, we can take legal action on your behalf. I nodded. Good, because they're not going to stop. She closed the folder. Neither will we. I walked out of that office with a full corporate protection order in place. If my family tried anything again, any false reports, any slander, anything, they'd be legally screwed. Their first attack had failed, and they had no idea how much worse it was about to get for them. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A new email. From the bank, dear Mr. and Miss S. Calloway, as your payments are now delinquent, we regret to inform you that your credit score has been affected. Additionally, failure to resolve this balance will result in further legal action and property removal procedures. Please contact us immediately. I let out a slow breath, rereading it twice. The reality was setting in. They weren't just losing the house. They were losing everything. Credit ruined, reputation destroyed, and still they hadn't learned. Because an hour later, I got another call. This time, it was my mother. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging, she was furious. "You vindictive little brat," she spat. "Do you know what you've done? The bank is calling. They're saying we're being evicted." I inhaled slowly. "You are. You don't get to do this to us," she screeched. "We'll fight you in court." I rolled my eyes. "With what money?" She fell silent. Because she knew. They were broke. They had nothing left. I leaned back in my chair, stretching. "You really should have just appreciated what you had." Her breath hitched. "Lindsay, please." "Goodbye, Mom," I said, voice flat. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. I stared at my phone, the screen still lit with my mother's last desperate call. She wasn't crying yet, but I knew it was coming. It always did. The shift from anger to guilt, then to begging, a pattern so familiar I could practically predict it like clockwork. Except this time, I wasn't playing along. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I exhaled slowly, tossing my phone onto the desk. My laptop was still open, the eviction notice sitting in my drafts, just waiting for me to hit send. And I would, but not yet. Let them sweat for a little longer. Let them realize just how deep they'd buried themselves. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the wooden surface. My uncle had warned me, they'll try to turn everyone against you. And sure enough, my inbox was already flooded with messages. Some from relatives, others from family friends. How could you do this to your own parents? They gave you everything, Lindsay. Now you're leaving them homeless? They're your blood. Whatever they said, it wasn't that bad. Just move on. I rolled my eyes. Move on? Did they think this was just about a few cruel words? No. This was about years of manipulation, of them treating me like I was less, like my success was theirs to take. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head. "We raised you. Everything you have, you owe to us." The irony was staggering. They had nothing to do with where I was today. I built my career alone. I paid off my own student loans. I worked late nights, took every opportunity, climbed my way up in an industry where they thought I didn't belong. And still, it was never enough for them. I pushed back from my desk, walking to the window. The city lights stretched out below, bright and unapologetic, a stark contrast to the darkness I'd let them drag me into for too long. I had one move left, one final step before I was truly free. I grabbed my phone, dialed the number I had saved for weeks. It rang twice before she picked up. "Lindsay," Kate's voice was sharp. "I was about to call you. Your family's lawyer just reached out." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She exhaled, frustration lacing her words. "They're trying to contest the purchase agreement, claiming you took advantage of them." I snorted. "Seriously? They're desperate," she said bluntly. "And they don't have a case. Every document was signed voluntarily. There's no loophole, no fraud, but they're hoping to drag this out, make it painful for you. That's their specialty," I muttered. She hesitated. "There's more. Your brother reached out to your company's board of directors." I went still. Kate continued, her voice tight. "He implied that you'd been misusing company resources. That they should, quote, look deeper into your finances." I clenched my jaw. Of course he did. When backed into a corner, he always tried to destroy something. HR already handled it, Kate assured me. "Your documentation saved you, but it proves one thing: they won't stop until they have nothing left to lose." I closed my eyes briefly, inhaling through my nose. "Then let's make sure they lose everything," I said, my voice steady. Kate was silent for a beat. Then she sighed. "I knew you'd say that. I'll file the final eviction papers tomorrow." "Thank you," I said, rubbing my temple. "And Kate?" "Yeah? Make sure they get the notice first, not their lawyer. I want to see their reaction." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Consider it done." The next morning, I woke to chaos. My phone buzzed, nonstop calls, texts, voicemails. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I grabbed a coffee and took my time getting ready for the day. By noon, Kate sent me an update. Eviction papers served. Your mother had a meltdown. Your brother called me a soulless corporate shill. Your father tried to negotiate. None of it worked. They have 30 days to vacate. I smiled. Good. They thought they could manipulate their way out of this. They thought they still had control. But this time, there was no coming back. My phone buzzed again. My mother. I sighed, finally answering. Lindsay, she sobbed. What are you doing? I stayed silent, letting her speak. You're ruining our lives, she cried. We raised you. We did everything for you. You can't do this to us. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Say what you really mean, Mom, I said coolly. You're not upset that I did this. You're upset that you didn't see it coming. She gasped like I had slapped her. We're your parents, she said, voice trembling. We made you who you are. No, I said, my voice cutting. You tried to break me. And when that didn't work, you tried to own me. But guess what? I'm not yours to control anymore. There was a long, shuddering silence. Then, she snapped. You'll regret this, she shrieked. One day you'll need us, and we won't be there. I almost laughed. Mom, I said, smiling. I haven't needed you in years. And with that, I hung up. For the last time, I stood at the front window of my apartment, watching the golden hues of the setting sun reflect off the city skyline. The world outside felt still, almost peaceful, but inside, my mind raced. It was finally over. The last eviction notice had been served. My house was empty now. My parents and brother had packed up what little they could take and left 2 days ago, disgraced, defeated, and for the first time in their lives, powerless. It was surreal. For years, I had let them dictate my life, my choices, my self-worth. They had built this false narrative that I owed them everything, that my success was something they had allowed me to have rather than something I had fought for. But the moment they called me a burden, they had sealed their own fate. I took a sip of wine, letting the rich, velvety taste linger. No more phone calls, no more guilt trips. No more pretending to be the dutiful daughter, bending over backward for people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I already knew who it was before I picked it up. I hesitated for only a second before answering. Uncle Jason. Hey, I said, keeping my voice even. Lindsay, he breathed, relief evident in his tone. You okay? I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Yeah, I'm okay. You sure? Because I just got off the phone with your mom. I closed my eyes briefly. Let me guess. She's playing the grieving mother act? She's telling everyone that you left them homeless, that you're heartless, Jason said with a bitter laugh. Same old playbook. Your dad's silent, as always. And Thomas? He's spiraling. Apparently, his friends don't want anything to do with him now that he's lost his leverage. I smirked. I can't say I'm shocked. They're still trying to find a way to fight this legally, but they have nothing. You covered every angle. I know, I murmured, staring at the framed documents on my desk, ironclad contracts, bank statements, legal confirmations, proof of every penny I had covered while they squandered their own money on their fake superiority. Jason sighed. I just wanted to check in. You did the right thing, Lindsay. For a moment, I didn't answer. I let the weight of his words settle in. I had done the right thing. So why did a small part of me still feel strange? Not regret, not guilt, something else. I know, I said finally, voice steady, and I don't regret it. Good, Jason said, because they don't deserve a second chance. I swallowed. No, they don't. But even knowing that, I couldn't shake the feeling of finality. The people who were supposed to love me the most had turned out to be nothing more than parasites in disguise. And now, they were gone. Jason cleared his throat. Listen, I know you're probably done with all things family, but Melissa and I are having a small get-together this weekend. Just close friends. No drama. You should come. I smiled, the invitation catching me off guard. You know, I think I might. Good. It's time to start living your life, kid. He was right. After we hung up, I stared out the window, the city buzzing with energy. A new beginning. That's what this was. For years, I had been weighed down by their expectations, their demands, their toxicity. But now, I had nothing holding me back. I turned away from the window, grabbing my laptop. There was still one last thing I had to do. The house looked different now. Standing in the empty living room, I took a deep breath. No furniture, no lingering scent of my mother's perfume, no framed pictures on the walls, just silence. I ran my fingers over the kitchen counter, the same counter where they had sat, laughing at me, belittling me, plotting against me. How poetic that this house, the very thing they had tried to use against me, was now my biggest victory. A set of keys jingled, and I turned as my realtor, Anna, stepped inside. "All ready?" she asked, offering a small smile. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." She glanced around. "It's a beautiful home." "It was," I murmured, "but it's time for a fresh start." I handed her the keys, and with that, it was done. As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not just from my family, but from the version of myself that had spent too long apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I pulled out my phone, typing a message to Kate. "House is officially on the market. Let's use the proceeds to start the foundation." She replied within seconds. "Perfect. This is going to help a lot of people, Lindsay." I smiled. That was the real victory. Not just walking away, not just winning, but turning something ugly into something meaningful. 6 months later, I stood at the podium, my heart pounding. The room was filled with faces, some familiar, some strangers, all here because of what I had built. The Lindsay Monroe Financial Empowerment Foundation. A place where people who had been financially manipulated, abused, or controlled could find the resources to take back their lives. I adjusted the microphone, clearing my throat. "I used to believe that family was everything," I began, my voice steady. "That no matter what, we owed them loyalty, love, and second chances." I paused, scanning the room. But what I learned was that real family isn't about blood. It's about respect, about mutual care. It's about the people who don't just take, but who give, who support, who lift you up instead of dragging you down. I took a deep breath. For years, I let people treat me like an endless resource. But standing here today, I know one thing for sure. I met the eyes of the audience. I am not a burden, and neither are you. The room erupted into applause. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt whole. They thought they could use me forever, but they never saw the storm coming. In the end, they lost everything, their home, their comfort, and most importantly, their control over me. And I walked away stronger, wiser, and finally free. But here's the real question. If you were in my position, would you have done the same? Or do you believe family deserves forgiveness, no matter what? Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you think. Family should be about love and respect, not obligation and manipulation. I learned the hard way that some people only value you for what you can give them, not for who you are. If someone sees you as nothing more than a financial safety net, it's time to set boundaries. Protect yourself legally, emotionally, and financially. You don't owe anyone blind loyalty, not even family. The moment I stopped feeling guilty for putting myself first was the moment I truly started living. If you're in a toxic situation, remember this. Real love doesn't come with a price tag.